Got another lesson here on angles. We start off with a few vocabulary terms. Let's take a look. Two angles with a sum of 90 degrees are called complementary angles. Okay, complementary angles together make 90 degrees. So I want you to draw this with me here. We're going to make a 90-degree angle here. But it's going to be two angles that combine. So go back to the vertex there and just draw a ray out from there. It doesn't really matter at what angle you draw that, but this angle and that angle combined make 90 degrees. Those two are called complementary angles. Two angles with a sum of 180 degrees, this time 180 degrees, are supplementary angles. So for this one, 180 degrees, remember, is a straight angle. Go ahead and draw a straight angle there. Pick a point for the vertex. And then we're going to draw a line somewhere out of this as well to create two angles. So this angle and this angle combined are 180 degrees. Supplementary angles are two angles with a sum of 180 degrees. And finally, a line that intersects two or more other lines. That's known as a transversal. We have a picture of a transversal down here in our next section. Right there. It intersects two parallel lines right there. It says two or more other lines, but in this case they're parallel. So let's take a look at this key concept box here. We got some more types of angles we're going to talk about as we look through this. Let's read through this. It says when a transversal intersects two parallel lines, 8 angles are formed. So you see the two parallel lines, you see the transversal that cuts through those, and you see all 8 angles. Blank lie inside the parallel lines. Those are called interior angles. All these angles that are on the inside of the parallel line. So we're talking about 3, 4, 5, and 6. And it lists those there. On the outside of the parallel lines, you have what are known as exterior angles. We're talking about 1, 2, 7, and 8 on the angles that are on the outsides of the parallel lines there. Okay, now let's talk about some special pairs of angles. Blank are interior angles that lie on opposite sides of the transversal. So they're interior, first of all, and they're opposite sides of the transversal. We call those alternate interior angles. And they give you examples here, angle 4 and angle 6. So angle 4 and angle 6 are alternate on opposite side of the transversal, but still interior, so on the inside of the parallel lines, alternate interior angles. And you notice this little equal sign with the squiggly above it? Between those, that means is congruent. So angle 4 is congruent to angle 6. In other words, they have the same measure. So if we say angle 4 is, let's say, 130 degrees, angle 6 is also 130 degrees. So you know that they're the same measure. The other pair of alternate interior angles are angles 3 and 5. These have the same measure as well. Those are alternate interior angles. Okay, exterior angles that lie on opposite sides of the transversal are alternate exterior angles. So we're talking about angles 1 and 7. I use an arrow to point to these this time. So angle 1 and angle 7. Those are on opposite sides of the transversal. Here, this one's on the left, that one's on the right, but they're on the outsides of the parallel lines. And you notice that we have the same symbol here for these. They are also congruent. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 7, and the other pair is angles 2 and 8 are also alternate exterior angles. And then finally, those angles that are in the same position on the two lines in relation to the transversal. You notice we have this top line of the parallel lines has 4 angles. The bottom line of the parallel lines has 4 angles. So if we pick a pair of angles that are in the same position, in other words, let's put a little asterisk here by 2. It's in the top right in these angles here with this parallel line and the transversal. The other angle that's in the top right down here that matches in the same position is angle 6. So angles 2 and angle 6 are what are known as corresponding angles. Okay, there are a total of 4 sets of corresponding angles. We gave this one here angle 2 and angle 6, but 1 and 5 are both top left. They're congruent. Notice all these congruent signs between these. Angles 4 and 8 are both in the bottom left. Angles 3 and 7 are both in the bottom right. You can see that all those different pairs of angles are congruent with each other. Right? Angle 1 is congruent to angle 5, angle 2 is congruent to angle 6, and so on. So those are different types of angles that we're going to be kind of referring to today. Let's move over to the back and do a bit of practice with this stuff. On the back side here, the together problems, it says find each missing angle measurement. All right, we have a couple of combinations here. We know that this is a 90-degree angle altogether right here, a perfect corner. So if this part makes up 35, then what's left over for this part here? So you could do 90 minus 35, or you could say 35 plus what equals 90. But basically you're going to kind of set up a little equation or do a little bit of algebra here in your head and think about what would be left over for that. It's going to be 55, right? So 55 degrees, because 55 plus 35 is 90. These two angles together are complementary angles that we talked about with our vocabulary term. All right, number 2, we got a straight line right here. When you got a straight line, you know that that altogether is 180. If this part makes up 20 of that, think about what's left over for this part. It's going to be 160 degrees, right? All right, numbers, this next section here, renumbers here. It says the two lines are parallel lines cut by transversal. If the measure of angle 5 is 40 degrees, find the other missing angle measurements. Okay, let's go ahead and write in 40 degrees here for this one right there. And we're going to use what we learned on the other side about angles, certain angles being congruent to help us come up with these. I'm going to go ahead and write, we're going to fill in the other 7 angles. Then we can go back and answer these questions when we're done with that. We're going to fill these in using what we know about alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding angles, and how we know which ones are congruent. The first thing you should do, though, is go ahead and find a straight line that matches up with your angle that you already know. So for example, 5 and 6 combine to make this straight line right here. So here's angle 5. We know that's 40 degrees. So we can use what we learned about up here about straight angles and how they're 180 altogether. So this is 180. What's left over for angle 6 here? So you got 40 degrees, and this would be 140 degrees, right? That would make a straight line altogether, 180. So now when you combine what you know already, you can find that missing one. Now, every single angle that is left here is either going to be 40 degrees or 140 degrees. And for most of these, you can probably just use common sense. All these acute angles, all these little ones, are going to be 40 degrees. All the obtuse angles would be 140. So you could probably just fill the rest of this out with common sense. But we're going to use what we learned on the other side there about alternate interior, alternate exterior, and corresponding angles to help us place the rest of these angles and then answer these questions. So let's start with, let's do alternate interior. Alternate interior with 5 on the inside of the parallel lines, but on the opposite side of the transversal would be right here. We know that alternate interior angles are congruent, so angles 3 and 5 would be the same. It also just makes sense because this is a little angle right here. Okay. Let's do, we could do alternate interior with 6 as well. So alternate interior with 6 would match up with 4. This would be also 140 degrees. That makes sense because it's this obtuse angle. Let's use one that we learned, let's do corresponding. So corresponding angles. Let's go back to 5 right here. Corresponding in this top left on this other straight line right here, the two parallel lines, would be right here, angle 1, and we know that corresponding angles are congruent, so this would also be 40 degrees. Corresponding with this one, this is angle 6, it's also going to be top right, 140 degrees for that one as well. So we're almost done. Let's do the other one we haven't talked about yet, which is alternate exterior. So on opposite sides of the transversal, but on the outside of the parallel line. So in other words, 1 and 7 are alternate exterior. So this one would also be 40 degrees right there. And then alternate exterior with this one, angle 2 and angle 8, 140 degrees. Now there's other ways to fill this out, but now we have all 8 angles filled out using kind of what we know about those different pairs of angles. Let's answer the question now here. Angle 7 is 40 degrees. Angle 8 is 140 degrees. Angle 2 is 140 degrees. And angle 1 is 40 degrees. So that gives us a little bit of an idea of how these different angle pairs work together and how we can find the missing angles even if we know just one of them. And so we'll do a little bit more work with this on these other practice problems in class.